Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you might be joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander, and I am, as always, honored and excited to get to host another Power to Fly virtual event. Now, before we dive into questions or introduce you to our speaker today, I just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items. This will be especially important if maybe this is your first event with Power to Fly. And if that's you, then hi, welcome. You. Now, the love is no less real for my frequent flyers, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us. I love seeing all of our familiar names and faces and avatars in the chat. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with Power to Fly and amazing companies like Rowe Price. Now, as we go in today, if you've never been to a Power to Fly event, the big thing to know is that we are all about participation. We want to make sure that the time that you took out of your day to be here with us live is worth it. So if you'd like to participate, you're welcome to do so in a couple different ways. You are always welcome to turn your cameras on if you'd like to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. But truly, y'all, no need to be Instagram perfect, okay? Just because I got fancy and took a shower yesterday does not mean that you can't bring your bathrobes, 5-day messy buns. We do not care. We just want to meet you where you are. You can come to us from your living room couch or corner office, makes no difference. Now, if you want to participate, but you don't want to do so with your camera, that's fine. You're not hurting my feelings. You can always chime in the chat thread. Now, our audience members will not be able to come off mute today. I'm sorry, y'all. We do have a full house today, but we want to hear from you. So please feel free to let us know that you are here in the chat. I do see we've got Ria starting to share links in the chat with us. Thank you, Ria. But please feel free, let us know where you're joining from. I'm always really eager to see how far our global audience spreads. So as we are going, oh, sorry, I lost my button. So as we're going here, please feel free to let us know where you're joining us from. I'm coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. This is land that belonged to the Fox, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi tribes in my area. So you're always very welcome to let us know where you're joining us from, and if you know, whose land you're on. And then just a quick call out as personal housekeeping. Again, my name is Meg Alexander. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a white woman, 37 years old, with purple and pink hair, blue glasses, and a black and white leopard print sweater. Now, the big thing otherwise to know about today's event is that we are recording. Now, what that means for you is you don't have to take notes. You get to sit back, enjoy the conversation that I'm about to have with Jasmine, and just, enjoy it, soak it all in. Now, you don't have to worry if you missed a reference or a resource that someone listed because of that recording. So what that means is in about 4 to 5 business days, Power to Fly is going to email everybody that registered, even people that didn't show up, no shade, it's okay. Everybody's going to get a link to where you can rewatch this recording when we post it on our website. Now, let's say that Jasmine says something unbelievably mind-blowing today. We're talking like paradigm shifting. You cannot wait 4 to 5 business days to share this information with a friend or a coworker or a relative. You do not have to. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. We're live streaming there now. Hi, YouTube. And you can check out the recording is usually posted there by the end of the day. So you can always head over there. Now on our YouTube channel, there is a great amount of like archive chats. We've got some of our favorites and playlists and stuff saved there. But truly, y'all, the website is where the mother load is, okay? This is like the Ark of the Covenant. All of the resources that we have, they are free, they're here for you, and we want you to have them. So even if you found us via YouTube, do not sleep on our website, y'all. There's some great resources there for all of you. Now, this also means that if you have questions, we want to encourage you to ask them. You can feel free to ask them in the chat. Truly, y'all, whenever you'd like, I've got eyes on target there, and I want to make sure we get to as many questions as we can today. Oh, y'all, seeing this, we've got Maryland, we've got Ohio, we've got Baltimore, Maryland, we've got Chicago. Oh my gosh, y'all, thank you so much for joining us. Arlington, Virginia, Colorado Springs, Kitchener, Ontario, San Francisco. Y'all, thank you so much for joining us today. All right, now, as we go through, like I said, if you've got questions, ask them in the chat. If you asked a question at registration and you're not sure if we're going to get to it or not, ask it in the chat. If we're addressing your question and you're not sure, like maybe there's some context or some details that we should know so we can, get you a good answer, let us know in the chat, y'all. That is the best way to make the most of the time that you spend with Power to Fly and Rowe Price today. Now, before we introduce you to their fabulous rep here today, let's talk a little bit about Rowe Price. Obviously, most people know them. Name recognition is not an issue for y'all, but they've been a great partner with Power to Fly for a number of years now. I think we've had them as an account as long as I've been here, so it's been at least 5. They're a really, really great org, and honestly, one of those orgs that I love for people to come learn about, because you might have name recognition, but that doesn't mean you know everything there is to know about Rowe Price. Now, if anything that we're saying today really sparks your interest and you want to take a look at Rowe, absolutely encourage you to. Their website or their company page on powertofly.com looks like what you're seeing in front of you now. There's some great things on this page that you can make use of, but the big thing I want to highlight for you at this point is the follow network. So I'll tell you some more about some ways that you can maximize this page for maybe an upcoming interview or something, but I'll tell you that at the end of the event. The big thing to know about the follow network, it's this big pink button right here. If you're not seeing it on the top of a company page on powertofly.com, it's probably because you're not logged in. So fix that right away. But I want to encourage you to check out this follow network, all right? You can follow and unfollow as many companies as you'd like, as many times, but basically what it does is it allows Power to Fly to tell that company that you're interested in working with them even before you fill out an application. So it's a really great option if you're actively job seeking, but don't see anything right this second that is like perfect you want to apply to. The other thing that it does is it allows Power Fly to take some of the weight off of you in your job search. So we will tell you when the companies that you follow post new roles. That way you don't have to come back and keep rechecking and checking and rechecking job boards, all right? It's boring, it's stupid, it's played out, we're not doing it anymore. We're gonna take that off your plate. So I really encourage you to check it out. Obviously, you can follow as many companies as you'd like, but I think you'll agree with me in saying that you should really check out Rowe Price. Take a look around, learn some stuff about them. They're really awesome. All right, now Jasmine Brennan is here today on behalf of Rowe Price. Now, Jasmine is the head of DEI for North America. She's a member of Rowe Price's corporate DEI or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team, and she serves as the VP for head of DEI in the Americas. Now, Jasmine has been with the firm since March of 2020, and Jasmine leads the DEI strategic initiatives for the Americas, oversees the firm's global BRG development or business resource group, and partners closely with the firm's DEI advisory groups, like Power to Fly, championing to accelerate progress and outcomes. Now, before she joined Rowe Price, Jasmine held a variety of DEI leadership roles across industrial distribution, consumer product, and human capital management industries. Now, in her last role, Jasmine led DEI and CSR at Aerotech, which is an Allegis Group company. During her tenure, Jasmine led a team with responsibility for inclusive leadership training and education, DEI councils and employee resource group governance, DEI client engagement and diversity talent programs, and philanthropic giving and employee volunteerism. Now, Jasmine is passionate about authenticity, inclusion, well-being, and belonging, and she incorporates those areas into both her personal and professional life. Jasmine, welcome to the stage today. We're so happy to have you. What else should we know about you today?
Meg, thank you so much for that warm introduction. I am so excited to be here today. So hello, everyone. Just for kind of context and awareness setting, my pronouns are she, her, aya. I am a Black woman. I have brown hair pulled back into a ponytail, and I am wearing a bright yellow blazer. I have been with Rowe Price, Meg, as you mentioned, for almost 4 years now, and I'm based today in my home in Ellicott City, Maryland, not too far from our corporate headquarters in Baltimore, Maryland. I also wanted to share a fun fact about me, because I know we've kind of got the download around my professional background, but one fun fact I would share is that while I would not proclaim myself as a runner, I have started to dust off my running shoes and dived into a couple of 5Ks and thinking about continuing to grow as a runner. So growing in that space for sure, but really excited to dive into this conversation and this topic.
That's awesome. I'm always kind of jealous of people that get back into running. I've hated it for so long that I will do anything to avoid cardio. But when you're training, do you do like street running? Do you like trail running? What are you getting back into?
So definitely trail running when it's warm. I have invested in a tread, which is downstairs in my home gym, so I have no excuses about getting my movement in first thing in the morning.
Nice, very much appreciative. Okay, cool. All right, so to guide us in, obviously we're here today to talk a little bit more about psychological safety in the workplace. So a lot of people had, big questions, big and really specific ones. So we're really excited to tackle them. Before we start with the questions, let's kind of level set. How do you define psychological safety within a diverse workplace? And how do you think that this manifests in the day-to-day interactions that people have in that workspace?
Yeah, Meg, thanks so much for raising this one. I think it's such a great lead-in as we dive into this topic. So I would say that in essence, psychological safety is the foundation that enables inclusion and belonging to really flourish. When individuals feel psychologically safe, they're more likely to actively participate, collaborate, and openly contribute and share their unique perspectives. Inclusion then ensures that diverse voices are not only present, but are actively engaged and respected. And then finally, we can kind of wrap it all up with belonging, which completes the picture by creating an environment where individuals truly feel that they belong, that there's a space for them, that they're valued, and of course, then that they can thrive. So when we feel psychologically safe at work, we feel comfortable taking the actions that on the surface can really be perceived as risky, like speaking up or sharing diverse or new perspectives, and even taking a fail fast approach when we're trying out new things, new ideas, new ways of working. So thinking about how this shows up in day-to-day interactions, I would say I've observed it in a couple of ways. First is in open communication. In psychologically safe environments, we see and experience a sense of encouragement and support in expressing our opinions, asking those questions and seeking to understand, as well as providing open dialogue around feedback. So essentially, folks that are experiencing psychological safety typically show up in these day-to-day interactions with the feeling of really being able to express their voices freely and contribute to discussions without that fear or added weight of being judged or their ideas being dismissed. I would say, secondly, psychological safety is really evident when people are actively practicing that attentive listening. I know that we typically talk quite a bit about active listening, but attentive listening is a space where we are seeking to understand others' viewpoints. And through this level of listening, we demonstrate empathy, validate individual experiences, and really foster that environment that thrives off of psychological safety. And then I would say, along that same vein, in psychologically safe spaces, constructive and respectful conversations are encouraged, even in the face of disagreements and debate. So individuals feel safe to challenge ideas, to push back, to engage in that healthy debate, but then also to explore different perspectives without any fear of kind of personal attacks on their own viewpoints or that hostility. So the last piece I would probably hit, and it ties into the dynamics of psychological safety in teams, is the fact that it's really an enabler of trust. So unlocking opportunities for more collaboration within teams is driven by having that sentiment of trust and building that psychological safety so that folks within teams feel comfortable asking for help, sharing resources, exchanging ideas, and really supporting one another's success.
Yeah, I love all of this. And I especially like how you're touching on the idea of the psychological safety, which is important for us to highlight, especially when it comes to people who maybe have never felt psychologically unsafe at work. It's and it's a concept that I understand. Yeah, if it's not something you've had to deal with in your day-to-day life, you might not have any idea that A, it's a thing, or B, why it's so important. So I think, especially if you are somebody who's coming to this discussion thinking like psychologically safe, like, yeah, we're safe, it's fine, everything's cool, let's just go do work, then awesome, good for you. I am so, so happy that you've never had to feel that way. The whole point is to make sure that nobody else has to feel that way either, right? So I love that we're talking about this, not just in terms of psychological safety for a specific group, but in this idea of no, we should all have psychological safety. That's going to mean something different for different people, but at the base, it's just that we trust everybody around us to be adults, to be respectful, and to value everybody in the space equally. And stuff that doesn't sound that hard, right? But if Barney's still singing about it 20 years later, it's probably still a thing we need to learn. Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, so let's talk about that safety, especially if you're not somebody who may or may not experience like feeling psychologically unsafe, what are some of the signs that that a work environment may not be real psychologically safe for everybody?
This is another great one. So thank you so much for raising it. And I think it's especially an important topic for people leaders. I think many of us can agree that managers play a significant role in cultivating that psychologically safe environment and being able to recognize and really diagnose the signs that indicate that psychological safety might be at risk is key to managers being able to unlock that potential and strengthen performance while also increasing retention. So that said, there are a few signs that can indicate lack of psychological safety that are visible, observable, and certainly spaces where we individually can kind of pay attention and self-assess where we are and where we're showing up, but certainly also as people leaders, it's important that we kind of remain aware of some of these signs. So first piece I would highlight is a fear of speaking up. So oftentimes when there is a lack of psychological safety, you'll observe that individuals hesitate to voice their opinions, share ideas, or ask questions. Again, really fearing some of those negative consequences to include ridicule, judgment, or even retaliation. Next, I would say lack of risk taking. So folks that aren't experiencing psychological safety typically are risk averse. They avoid suggesting innovative solutions. They stick to the familiar and the safe, and they may not contribute to any kind of brainstorming discussions or even offer alternative perspectives. Even if it's clear and visible that they have an idea, you may be able to observe that hesitation in taking risk. Another piece that I would highlight around lack of psychological safety is avoidance of feedback. So folks that don't feel that sentiment of safety typically resist or become defensive when they're receiving feedback, really viewing that as more of a personal attack rather than an opportunity for growth. So that really goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, Meg, as it relates to trust. When folks understand and they trust that the individual that's delivering the feedback is doing so in a spirit of growth and collaboration, there is more openness and actually seeking out that feedback as opposed to avoiding it. And then the last piece that I would highlight that is certainly tied to not feeling or fully experiencing psychological safety at work is increased stress and anxiety. So there may be signs exhibited around heightened stress, anxiety, or some of the symptoms of burnout. And the fear of making mistakes or facing criticism is typically at the root cause of some of this increased stress and anxiety that folks that are really struggling to feel psychologically safe experience. But one thing I'll say as I kind of wrap up some of the thoughts that I had around this question specifically is that, you know, for people leaders that might hear some of these suggestions and now be thinking through ways that they can go back to their teams and support their direct reports and ensure that they're cultivating psychological safety is to make sure that in addition to those observations, that you're also engaging in candid dialogue. So I would encourage everyone to not only assess and observe, but also to engage in dialogue so that, you know, you're meeting your direct reports where they are and you're co-creating a plan for psychological safety in a way that's really going to resonate and that you're asking those open-ended questions to ensure that you're doing your part as that individual's manager to drive forward that sentiment of safety.
I love all of this. Absolutely fabulous, and very much kind of goes to what we talked about earlier, right? Like if someone isn't feeling psychologically safe, the last thing you're going to do is make a target of yourself, right? You're not going to ask for help, and you're definitely so you don't want to like make it an obvious kind of thing, but like it's really difficult to try and convey to somebody how much this can really impact your performance at work, like just your basic functions. For especially if somebody's never had that situation, right, where they've had to like either hide a part of themselves or feel like they can't really talk about it. I've been in places where mental health discussions were not well received, both because of, you know, toxicity of the workplace or just like the nature of the people that I worked with. And so it's so important, and you really do need managers to kind of set that tone, because that's who's setting the tone for all of this, other behavior that you're seeing in the workplace. It's not just like whatever the situation itself is, it's all that extra brain space that goes into making sure, have I said the right thing? Have I said too much? Wait, did I say too much to that person? Maybe I need to go try and walk that back a little bit. Ooh, I don't know. What do I like? It's so much stuff that we don't need to bother with. I like this. I'm loving the focus here too. Okay, so let's talk about ways that psychological safety can correlate with improved performance. So if you have a workplace that maybe is not so safe and you are starting to make improvements, what might people see?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is another great question, and it dovetails really nicely with what we discussed in response to that first pre-submitted question. Because of course, psychological safety does have a strong correlation with improved performance, both at the individual levels, but certainly more broadly at the team level. So a few examples of how psychological safety drives improved performance, especially spaces that organizations that are investing in this work can expect to see some material impacts and shifts, would be increased innovation and creativity. So again, going back to everything we talked about related to being able to remove the weight of some of the perceived need to, whether it is monitor or think differently about expressing ideas or openly and candidly sharing, when employees feel psychologically safe, they're more likely to share those diverse ideas, to take risks, and to really think innovatively and outside of the box. We see that this leads to increased innovation and creativity, certainly within the team. And of course, at the individual level, there's a difference in the experience around really being able to challenge those viewpoints and lean in and engage in that healthy dialogue and debate that we spoke about without the fear or the weight of that judgment. I also believe that organizations that are really leaning into this space can expect to experience enhanced problem solving capabilities coming out of their teams. So in psychologically safe environments, individuals are encouraged to lean into open communication and that collaboration, which really positions them to contribute their perspectives freely and demonstrate the expertise and even some of the unique and perhaps provocative or bold ideas that can result in solving really complex, challenging, or nuanced problems. So again, having that safety in place unlocks the potential for folks to share ideas that perhaps they would not have if they were censoring or monitoring their responses. And then, of course, I think I would be remiss if I didn't highlight the fact that psychological safety really drives employee engagement and retention. So with that safety piece enabled, unlocked, folks are really well positioned to provide their best insights, perspective, expertise, and to perform at the highest levels, which again, then drives that sense of belonging, engagement, and we see the strengthening of retention. Of course, I think we can all agree that when you're engaged, you're locked in, you're enjoying the employment relationship, that you're more likely to go the extra mile. And when you feel safe, when you feel seen, valued, heard, then you're open to contributing that discretionary effort that some of us might keep on the sidelines if we're instead using some of that energy to protect ourselves and we're not feeling that sense of safety. So all that to say, Meg, I think it's well worth the investment for any organizations out there that are thinking about doubling down on this important work.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It kind of reminded me as I was listening to you, you harped on the idea of trust. And I think this is something really important, right? Because the trust is so fundamental and can be so helpful to both sides, not just managers or not just employees, but that trust is so helpful. But really what you're doing is you're pretty much guaranteeing that, like, look, you can be unsure about where we're going with this, but you should trust in me that I'm making the choices that will lead us to the right place, or I have your best interests in mind. And so really, you're just trying to make sure that when you get to that period of uncertainty, because we all get there because none of us knows what's happening next, you have a little bit more grace, I should say, like either from your direct reports or with your coworkers or what have you. So yeah, I love how key trust really is to this, because it's like we're making ourselves vulnerable with the understanding that everybody A gets that and respects it, and B, like, will follow suit. So yeah, I think the trust angle is huge here.
Absolutely.
Um, all right, let's talk about ways that you can drive this inclusion from the top down. In what ways should leadership really actively support and champion these initiatives so that they carry on?
Absolutely. So I love this question, particularly because as a DEI leader, and I know that in engaging with my team at Rowe Price and other friends in the industry, we always say that we don't do this work in a bubble or in isolation. The work of advancing DEI is, certainly areas where we each have a role in contributing, regardless of our level of leadership, where we sit in an org chart. And so I think that leaders at all levels, to include folks that are leading themselves, leading culture, leading projects, teams, play a role in advancing inclusion. And so I would encourage folks, as you're thinking about what role you can play, to really consider your sphere of influence, where you can make an impact, and dive into some of those spaces. But to maybe bring this to life a little bit and share some tangible examples, I put some thought into a few. The first is active listening. So I would say that one of the key pillars of inclusive leadership is having the ability, the willingness, and the capability to actively and attentively listen, as we were talking about earlier, Meg. So inclusive leaders invest the time in creating space for open dialogue. They encourage diverse perspectives to be heard in these forums, and they also ensure that there are spaces for these diverse voices to come through without interruption or judgment, which I think that we all know a lot of underrepresented groups, including women and people of color, can be in meeting spaces and oftentimes spoken over or interrupted. So that active listening component is key to unlocking inclusion, but certainly also that psychological safety piece around really being able to openly listen and engage. So a couple of ways that leaders can demonstrate that they are actively listening is by asking open-ended questions, paraphrasing what they've heard to ensure understanding, but then also making sure that they're providing their undivided attention during conversations. So I know that we're in this digital age of multitasking, but as inclusive leaders, when you're building those psychologically safe connections, it's really important to provide undivided attention and ensure that individuals, especially when sharing perspectives around culture, around DEI, around their lived experiences, feel seen, heard, and that they're the primary focus of your attention. We've been talking a lot about psychological safety, so I think I'd be remiss if I overlooked that component of what makes an inclusive leader really actively engaged in driving the work forward as a champion. So we've spoken a lot about open communication, inviting folks to actively participate in decision-making and respecting diverse perspectives. I think that this is something that inclusive leaders can put into practice by ensuring that they're actively soliciting input, especially from more quiet voices or individuals who aren't tapped as much to provide perspective, as well as by acknowledging and valuing contributions and ensuring that they're providing feedback regularly and constructively to demonstrate investment in diverse individuals' career growth and progress. And then lastly, I would say, in addition to ensuring that there's equity baked into key decisions, invested in ensuring that they're clearing pathways for diverse talent to grow, but then also taking a critical eye at the culture and opportunities to enhance equity, inclusion, and belonging for all, but certainly with the lens of underrepresented talent and marginalized groups in mind. So I had plenty to share on this one, Meg. I came ready for this one.
Heck yes, of course. All right, so as we are trying to encourage that psychological safety, we got a really good question from the chat here. Helen had asked, if we don't see this trickling down from management, do you think that there's a good way to be diplomatic in getting bosses to understand and utilize these skills? So let's talk about it. If your top-down leadership doesn't really seem to be pushing this in the way that you would like, what should people do? What are some of the options that you would have people go through first?
Absolutely. It's such a great question. And I think that when you are on perhaps the receiving end of a less than optimal experience or engagement, it's really important to find ways either to identify advocates that can share the feedback and share the sentiment of a lack of psychological safety, or even ensure that you're engaging with whether it's training, resources, development opportunities to provide to that leader. So I think it is certainly leveraging others to be able to not only talk through what you're experiencing and identify ways to ensure that some of the concepts of psychological safety are cascading and making their way to you, but also finding spaces and remembering to take care of yourself in the process, right? Because I know that several of us that perhaps, are not experiencing the best workplace environment and are at a place where perhaps escalating to leadership and providing those subtle hints, and also engaging those around us in our networks as champions may fall flat, or may take some time to address, ensuring that we're caring for our self-care, our well-being, and our overall mental health is incredibly important. So that's what I would recommend at kind of an individual level. I would say organizationally, if there are macro level trends and broader impacts, it sounds like an opportunity to enhance accountability across leadership levels and also double down on training and awareness as well.
Yeah. Honestly, a lot of us will be in positions like this where you hear management either talk a good game about like, oh, these are some of the initiatives we've got this year, and then maybe kind of nothing comes from it. You might also have leadership that's a little bit crickets on the subject and you wish that they were speaking up. In different places that I've been, one thing that I saw be successful was when leadership had said like, hey, we're going to do such and such. Don't just ask them, hey, are we going to do this? Be like, oh, I'm so excited to see us get to this place. How can I help with that? Where are we moving towards that? I'm so excited for us to be there. How can I help? Like, because then you're not just saying like, TikTok, man, because like, let's be real, it is overdue. But catch more flies with honey than we do with vinegar. So I love coming from a place of like, this is going to be so great. How are we working on this? Like, get people excited because, they announced it and you're excited about it. So now they got to keep walking that walk. All right. Do you think that there's anything else that leadership should really be considering or specific actions they should take when they really want to prioritize that psychological safety?
Yeah, I think it's really important for leaders to ensure that they're leading by example. So, Meg, as you just mentioned, the topic of psychological safety, I think, is new. It's evolving in its reach within the industry and within organizations. And I think that leaders that are learning about psychological safety, taking risks and cultivating it within their teams, and really seeking to understand how best to support this work can demonstrate the vulnerability in their journey toward cultivating psychological safety. They can be transparent about their mistakes, missteps, uncertainties, and that in and of itself really breeds more psychological safety, right? When folks around you see that you are human, and you have also made some missteps, they're more comfortable and feel invited to do so. I would also say, again, I know we've talked quite a bit about trust, but establishing trust takes time and it's critically important. So leaders should really invest in building trust through consistent actions and clear communication. So there should be no guesswork aligned with a leader's leadership brand. If they are really prioritizing psychological safety, the leader should be reliable, maintain confidentiality, and really follow through on commitments. We've talked a lot about open dialogue, active listening. So I think those are really critical components of a leader leaning in and specific actions they can take. But I also think it's important for leaders to be able to address conflict and mistakes constructively, in addition to being able to have dialogue that is rooted in challenging perspectives and adding new ideas. So when the going gets tough and there are difficult conversations to be had, or challenging conversations to be had, these are oftentimes the most important spaces where leaders can cultivate that psychological safety. And I think that's done really well by approaching mistakes made or conflicts as opportunities for shared and collective learning rather than opportunities to point blame, point fingers, and call folks out for missteps. So leaders should really be open to encouraging dialogue and retrospectives around what happened, the outcomes, and again, leveraging some of these lessons learned around conflict, missteps, or some of those risk-taking pieces as spaces for continuous improvement and learning.
As we keep talking about truth, or not truth, trust, and we keep coming back to that, I keep reminding myself, or keep coming back up what my therapist has told me, that your brain does not recognize the difference between anxiety and excitement. That anxiety and excitement are chemically the exact same thing. Your brain doesn't know the difference. It's just whether you are anticipating good outcomes or anticipating negative outcomes. And so when we're talking about that trust, you're building that because you're hoping that people will trust that you are going to carry them through. But if there is any of that uncertainty around that specific instance, at least they have trust in you. So I really like that we're kind of coming back to this, and also highlighting the fact that, like, to show and to build that trust, especially with people who may or may not feel a certain degree of psychological safety or lack thereof, you have to make yourself vulnerable. You have to show that, like, hey, open arms, open hands, like, I'm not coming with bad intentions, here's what's going on. And truly, if you are in a management role, that shouldn't necessarily be an issue. Like, not everybody's super extroverted or whatever, but making yourself vulnerable to benefit your team is a function of the role, whether you're a CEO or you're just like a team lead. So I really like that, we're kind of coming at this from a perspective of trying to make sure that everyone feels safe to do this. Because, like, if you don't feel safe as a leader, you can only imagine how unsafe other people feel to make themselves vulnerable at that company. So yeah, like, truly, really try and put yourself, especially if you have not experienced this personally, try and put yourself in those people's shoes, and really kind of understand what you're asking them and why they need this like support. You know what I mean? Why people need to feel this security. All right, let's talk about some of the more unique challenges that might be faced. There are going to be different situations or different support needed by either different groups, whether this specific group has been, like, underrepresented, historically marginalized, whatever the case might be. As companies are working on addressing those unique challenges and unique needs for each group, how can they make sure that they are accurately addressing them for everyone, and not just saying, like, okay, great, you need special treatment, you get special treatment A, and that's the one that everybody gets, and there you go. What should people know, and what should orgs know about really addressing these needs in their own right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's what I'll say, Meg. I do think that these days, the concept of intersectionality, or multiple marginalized identities, is just a reality of the way that many of us, the majority of us, show up in the world. So I show up in the world at the intersection of ethnicity and gender and a host of other things. And so organizationally and strategically, as you think about building an infrastructure and building an environment in which individuals with these multiple intersectional identities that define how they show up in the world, how they work, how they engage, it's really important to think comprehensively. So I would say first, the first place to start, and the place to continue to revisit, is in policies and practices. So any practice or policy that is established should really have the consideration around intersecting identities and experiences of these individuals. And of course, this will require lift, and will require identification of some spaces within the employee life cycle where the impact of those intersectional identities can play a role. So that can include really examining recruitment and promotion processes, ensuring that there's equitable access to resource and opportunities, and also providing accommodations that address the specific needs of individuals with multiple intersectional identities. I would also say a key area that we have focused around ensuring that we're cultivating a climate of inclusion at Rowe Price has been in really leveraging the perspective of our business resource groups. So I would encourage organizations to support and really partner with employee-led networks, whether that is BRGs, ERGs, employee networks, whatever they're called and whatever the nomenclature is within organizations, because not only do these groups provide a safe space for individuals of varied walks of life, backgrounds, experiences to connect with others through networking, mentorship, and advocacy, but these groups also provide organizations with a sense of associate sentiment, what the trends are, how employees are navigating, and where there are spaces to shift and reprioritize strategy to ensure that needs are met. Because of course, the diverse workforce is evolving and those needs continue to shift and change. I would also say that through the lens of intersectionality, training and education are key. So as I just mentioned, all of the evolutions, and as much as the diverse workforce is shifting, really require organizations to continue to upskill their associates and employees, but also to remain abreast and apprised of all of the shifting landscape as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So remaining aware, driving that training, and enhancing education are key. And then lastly, I think that regularly evaluating programs, policies, and outcomes is key to driving and advancing this work. I often say that there are usually no bad ideas for programs, for initiatives, for strategies as it relates to DEI, but prioritizing is important and measuring impact, outcome, and success are critical. Because of course, we are talking about individuals, we're talking about people and their experiences and how that correlates to performance, and being able to capture outcomes, quantify the magnitude and impact, and drive things forward or reprioritize is key to ensuring that the focus on evolving and driving strategy forward remains aligned.
Yeah, and I very much appreciate the emphasis on that feedback and not just listening to people, but like actively acknowledging that. Because like it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, okay, you guys need extra help. All right, well, I'll just do this, 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 and this. And then if it's not working and people are like, hey, this isn't working, it's like, well, you know what, it's not good enough. It's like, no, that's the whole point of this. Like, is it working? No, let's keep improving it. Like, this is not just a like, okay, now first we had nothing, now we have this and it's kind of sucky. No, we're all going to be continuously learning and growing throughout our entire lives. Let's just get into the practice of it and make it a habit. But yeah, really, it's like if you were going to do compliance, right? Nobody does compliance on January 2nd and was like, okay, great, we're done. We don't ever have to do compliance ever again. That's not how this works. So because the world constantly changes, so does DEI. So this is something we have to kind of keep exploring. What should we know if as people who maybe exist outside of the DEI field, but do still, work in a workplace? What can those people do to really help to create these psychologically safe environments?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that psychological safety is not something that is cultivated or curated by one individual in particular. It typically takes a village, if you will, to cultivate a sentiment of psychological safety. We all have to be invested in cultivating it for others that we're partnering with, engaging with, leading, collaborating with, and reciprocally expect that from others. So I would say one way to not only embrace and contribute to inclusive environments for anyone, certainly folks that are sitting outside of a core DEI role, would be to embrace a learning mindset. So as we both have said, Meg, there's so much evolution, shift, and change as it relates to DEI, and embracing the fact that there is that amount of change, carving out the time to regularly educate and upskill as it relates to DEI is really important. And I think a space where anyone can invest the time and be really well positioned to lean in and support their DEI strategy within their organization. I would also say that, in addition to the upskilling, the training, the resources, the podcasts, all of the good stuff that exists out there to support a learning mindset, engaging in conversations with colleagues that you've developed rapport with and a relationship with is a great way to continue to grow, but also to create that sentiment of inclusion by building relationships and deepening those relationships in really meaningful ways. And then the last piece that I would say is get really creative and curious about your influence, your role, your scope, and things that you can do within your day-to-day to cultivate and drive forward DEI. So within your organization, if you're not with Rowe Price, take a look at the strategy, take a look at a couple of initiatives. Where do you see yourself there? Where can you make an impact? Where can you move things forward? Lean in there. And certainly if you are a colleague from Rowe Price, again, take a look at where there's opportunity, where you can lean in, give me a call, and we can talk through ways that you can lean in and support our ambition to continue growing our inclusive culture and environment. But all of that to say, Meg, there is a wealth of opportunity, and I think that it just takes a bit of time for folks to reflect on their own scope of influence and where they can make a difference and invest the time in learning and upskilling in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because you're not part of one of these groups does not mean that you don't want to support, or doesn't mean that you, are not welcome to learn more about them. And I think, Jasmine, you're completely right. Like, it's totally fine to ask questions. Obviously, people are not required to educate you. But if you do have specific questions, it's completely fine to ask them. It's just make sure you're leading with that, from that place of honest and just honest curiosity and an interest to learn. Because it's one thing to ask a question just to be kind of a snot. It's quite another to be like, I actually am really curious about this. Would you mind speaking to me about it? And truly, this is also a situation where you can leverage those ERGs too. Some of them exist really more to support that underrepresented or marginalized group as opposed to, for allies. But that doesn't mean that they can't also have, an education factor as well. So utilize all of the tools in your arsenal, y'all. Truly think outside the box when it comes to these things. I'm loving everything that Jasmine is saying here. How do you infuse inclusion, especially with groups who might be initially hesitant to participate? I've sat in on a bunch of stuff like this at previous companies I've worked for, and there's always kind of that group of people that sort of hangs at the back and they're just not real open to basically anything. It's a very you can't sit with us kind of vibe. How do you recommend that people go about trying to infuse that inclusion or bring them around?
That's a good one. I would say that's a delicate dance when you're working on shifting perspective from groups that perhaps are a bit more hesitant around leaning into inclusion, leaning into psychological safety. And in my experience, I found that some individuals that are originally hesitant feel that way because they don't see themselves in the DEI strategy, via their identity, their lived experience, whatever the case may be. So that lack of connectivity in some cases drives a hesitance to lean in or to engage with some of the work. My experience has been, by having dialogue and making those that are hesitant feel psychologically safe to openly express their perspectives, more time than not, these individuals begin to lean in and they find pieces of the DEI work that really resonate with them and their lived experience. So it's interesting. I do think that I have had success by cultivating psychological safety for folks and for groups that are hesitant and are kind of on the margins and hanging back as it relates to DEI efforts, but by opening up the door for that dialogue and encouraging some of that, straight talk, safe space conversation, folks typically are able to grow in their level of engagement with the work, and again, begin to kind of see themselves in ways that they can participate and benefit from the work as well.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we had a couple questions here. We've got a little less than 10 minutes left. So we've gotten some great questions in from the chat, so we'll try and involve those as well. Let's see. Lynn had chimed in saying, as someone looking for my next position, I would love to know how to find out which companies prioritize and embody psychological safety, like who actually walks the walk, not just talking the talk. Now Lynn had asked for like a database or any tips on how to access information like that. I don't know of any like that, but if you are on the job hunt and you're trying to figure out, is this place going to be safe for me? What are some things that job seekers should think about?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know of a database per se, but I do think that the interview process is a great space and opportunity to learn about the culture of an organization. So I would say some good ways to assess an organization's maturity or investment in psychological safety is to think about the level of open communication that you as a candidate are on the receiving end during the interview process. Is there transparency regarding the duration of the interview process, who you'll be meeting with? Are there spaces for you to ask questions, to request to meet with additional individuals that you might be engaging with if offered the position? I would also say that engaging psychological safety through the interview process, you could and should also feel invited and welcome to ask questions regarding the culture, the work that the organization is doing in this space, but also to inquire more broadly about the impact of the work, how long the organization has been on their journey. So I would definitely say leverage that interview process as a bit of your way of interviewing the organization for psychological safety and for a fit for yourself.
I'm like internally screaming. I can't tell you how much I support everything that she's saying here right now. Ask the questions, right? If you want to know about the ERGs, if you want to know about, what the support looks like, ask the questions, but don't just ask them, listen to the answers and listen to how the answers are delivered. Okay. If you ask some company about where they are in their DEI journey and they are mad and all you're doing is asking, maybe dig a little deeper. Maybe just see, like, if you're asking somebody like, oh yeah, like, do you have employee resource groups? And they say no. Are they saying no in a like, really rather you talk about this, let's move on to another subject? Or are they saying no in a way of like, we actually don't have them, but if you were to join the company, that might be something we could talk about starting. I think that'd be really interesting. So, truly, I'll ask the questions. I mean, Power to Fly is not immune to this, okay? We are on our journey just the same as everybody else. So no matter where it is you're applying, interview them right back, please. You have to do this. They're not going to do it for you because they don't know what you're looking for. But absolutely ask the questions. And truly, like Jasmine said, for a company that's on this journey, no matter where they are, it shouldn't be embarrassing. They should be perfectly fine saying, here's where we are. That's okay. All right. We don't have a crystal ball. None of us do. But for the last question, I'm going to get to ask, what future trends do you think we might see in the workplace regarding psychological safety and workplace inclusion?
Yeah, so in the absence of that crystal ball, Meg, I would say I really anticipate growing emphasis on holistic well-being. So I can foresee that organizations will increasingly recognize the importance of holistic well-being and the impact that it has on their employees' outcomes, performance, and the sentiment of inclusion. I think that this goes hand in hand with promoting mental health awareness, offering resources for stress management, and having a better appreciation and understanding of how psychological safety shows up differently for marginalized groups as well as those with intersectional identity. So I see there continuing to be a focus and evolution on the impacts of psychological safety. And then I would say more broadly, and kind of certainly building it on that same vein, I do foresee an increased focus on intersectionality. I think as the world evolves, our society evolves, that we can anticipate folks not only identifying with more diverse identities and dimensions, but also perhaps feeling welcome and expecting an environment where they can bring more of themselves and some of the identities or components of who they are that they previously had not brought into the workplace. So I think there will be a lot more authenticity that folks bring into the workplace, especially with the next generation of talent coming into the workplace. And I foresee that organizations will have to ready themselves and their cultures for intersectional identities and the impacts that that has on really cultivating inclusion.
Heck yes. Y'all, the kids are going to save the day. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are coming.
Oh, yeah.
We're at the point of work where we have the most generations working at the same time. So we really are on this cusp of like, okay, things are going to have to change because the loud ones are coming and we're not satisfied with how everything is right now. So I absolutely love this. All right. In the last 5 minutes we have, I want to pull the focus back around to T. Rowe Price a little bit. If you've got somebody going in to interview at T. Rowe Price, what is your advice to them? What do you think is like the top tip someone should know if they're going to interview at T. Rowe Price?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, bring your authentic self. So we are keen, eager, and want to not only hear about your prior experience, skill sets, capabilities, but the culture add that you will bring to our organization. So I know that many of us from diverse backgrounds, experiences, walks of life have heard the term covering. I invite you to bring your full self to us, introduce us to who you are rather than your representative, and allow us to also do the same as we get to know you through the interview process. I would also say, as you're engaging, ask about the DEI strategy, the work that we're doing, and our progress, as well as our commitment to doing this work. And last but not least, I would say showcase the full breadth of your capabilities, your skill sets. We are seeking leaders, dynamic change agents, and folks that are going to drive our strategy and outcomes into the future. And so I would encourage, and my ask of anyone who's considering T. Rowe Price would be to show up, show out, and bring all that you have to offer into those interview spaces.
Yes, of course. Now, if folks are sitting here listening and saying like, yeah, Jasmine sounds amazing, like this is so great, what's something that they should know about T. Rowe Price? Like, what's the thing that keeps you there? It's like, I'm not going to find this anyplace else. You know, is it the killer plants in the lobby? Is it Taco Tuesday in the lunchroom? Like, what is the thing that keeps you at T. Rowe Price? You're like, I'm not going to find this elsewhere. This is where I am.
I would say our commitment to progress. I mean, we are a relationship-oriented organization. We are collaborative in nature and really committed to driving outcomes forward, but also having a great time doing so in good company and ensuring that we're all growing along the way. And that's really exciting to me because it positions me to grow, to continue to make an impact, but also to be able to do so in the company of folks that I really just enjoy doing this work with and getting to know, and who I enjoy celebrating our wins with as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, truly, we spend the most amount of time like of your working or your waking life, you spend the most amount of time with your work people. And so I think you're absolutely right. It's a completely different feeling when you're with other people that have not necessarily the same values, but a similar value structure, and you're all working towards that one goal. It's a completely different feeling than being at a company where it's like, well, I work here. It's fine. It's totally different once you find some place that you actually fit. And, you know, it's like I tell people constantly, go where you are celebrated, not just tolerated. This is huge, absolutely huge. Shannon also chimed in the chat saying, I'm 3 weeks into my career at T. Rowe Price, and I've never been so warmly welcomed at a new job before. Shannon, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I love, love, love hearing stuff like this. All right, Jasmine, we are almost at the end of time. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience members that we weren't able to today?
I think we covered it all. I would just encourage everyone to continue to dive into this space. It is evolving. It is not the easiest, but it is absolutely worth it to drive belonging and outcomes. And for all of us that are playing a role in contributing to cultivate that psychological safety and inclusion for others, continue to do so, invest in doing the work, and celebrate the progress along the journey.
Yes, yes. Oh, say it louder for the people in the back. Thank you so much, Jasmine. All right. I'm really thankful we got to spend time with you today. I cannot wait to do this again soon. If anything that you've heard today, y'all, makes you curious, makes you want to check out T. Rowe Price, I really encourage you to check out their company page. You can see it on the screen right now. The other thing that I want to highlight for you here, if you think you might be going into an interview with Rowe Price, here is a tip, all right? On every company page on powertofly.com, there's 3 awesome tabs. Now, jobs is the one everybody cares about because obviously it's where you're going to find and apply to roles. However, the overview tab, the events tab, and the company insights tab. If you think you might have an interview with that company, go through those tabs. You will find some really cool stuff. There's usually meet the recruiter videos, ask me anything posts. There's usually blog posts for every company. That is a wealth of information that you can go through and comment on, and it will stand out so much better. And it's not going to be the same Business Insider article that everybody is mentioning because that's what was released this week. So truly take advantage of some of the resources here. There is some great stuff that you can pull out for an interview. And we really, really, really want to make sure that y'all are able to utilize these resources at every stage of your career. Now, that is going to bring us to the end of time today, but I hope that you have enjoyed today half as much as I have. If this was your first Power to Fly event, I sincerely hope it will not be the last. If this was your 1000th, we cannot wait to see you come back here soon for another event. Don't forget, we've got our virtual job fair happening on Thursday this week. So if you haven't registered for that yet, make sure you sign up. And I can't wait to see y'all back here for another event soon. Have a nice day, everybody. Bye.